On the 29th of January 1948, inside of the execution chamber within Hamelin Prison, a terrifying and brutal Nazi police chief and Gestapo guard was brought to the gallows. The executioner, a skilled British man named Albert Pierrepoint, had met with this beast days before the execution was scheduled to calculate the drop needed to bring the life of Willi Tessmann to an end with one snap of his neck. At the end of the Second World War, there were many ruthless and barbaric members of the Nazi Party who never faced any actions for their crimes that they committed during World War II. There are still some war criminals who are being searched for today to answer for possible charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Willi Tessmann was known for being an executioner with his rifle, and he took part in a number of shootings of prisoners of war that violated the rules and laws of warfare. He was known inside of different prisons for being a torturer, but what was the story with his execution? Welcome to The Untold Past. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Willi Tessmann was born on the 15th of January 1908 inside of Hamburg, and there was very little in his early life that would allude to the fact he would one day become one of the most ruthless war criminals of the Second World War. Tessmann was, as a young man, involved in the Protestant Church, and he attended a number of youth groups that were linked to the church, and after he left school he trained to become a gardener and finished this apprenticeship in 1925. He then, unsurprisingly, worked as a gardener for a period until he, like many other people in the 1930s, underwent a period of unemployment as the economic turbulence hit Germany. He was also part of the Young German Order, and he remained a member of this until in 1932 he joined the Nazi Party. Inside of Germany, there were many people who were being bowled over by the politics of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Hitler promised to restore German pride in the aftermath of the First World War, and he wanted to restore it to a powerful European nation. The Treaty of Versailles, which dealt with the aftermath of the conflict, ordered the German nation to accept guilt and blame for beginning the First World War, and they had to pay huge sums of reparations to rebuild France and Belgium. Hitler also promised people better employment opportunities, wages, and to fix many of the issues domestically within Germany, and with this many people flocked to join the Nazi Party. But Willi Tessmann went further, and he then joined the SS, which was Heinrich Himmler's paramilitary group and wing of the party. The SS began as a small bodyguard detachment for Hitler and senior Nazi figures, and they were tasked with protecting those people at speeches and rallies, but they later were transformed to become one of the most feared military groups of the Second World War, some of the most ardent Nazis, and the guards of the concentration camps. The SS had the blood of millions of people on their hands by the time the war came to an end. Inside of the SS, Tessmann seemed at home, and in February 1934 he was given a job inside of the Hamburg police force. His father-in-law had helped him to get this job, and he then underwent a period of training. After completing this, Tessmann was then working for the Gestapo as a guard inside of the Fuhlsbüttel concentration camp in September 1934. This was an early prison, which was said to have been where the oppression and terror of fascist rule manifested themselves, and it was a ruthless police prison, which was under the administration of the Gestapo. As a prison, it was home to thousands of people over the years, and as Hitler's stranglehold over the nation ramped up, roughly 7,000 people were passing through Fuhlsbüttel every year. One former prisoner later claimed about the conditions of the prison that the prisoners had to stand at attention in the yard for hours. They were hit in the face or kicked in the buttocks, but they also resorted to brutally mistreating individual prisoners under the most degrading conditions with whips, ox whips, belts and chair legs, sometimes until they collapsed unconscious. Prisoners were taken out of their cells at night by so-called rolling squads and brutally beaten there. There were many communists, social democrats and other prisoners held inside the prison, and SS and SA members had been involved in managing the camp. There were hundreds of people killed inside the prison, and there were many executions carried out by Willi Tessmann. Tessmann, for a brief period, worked as a communications operator in Hamburg, and he then attended a Nazi police training course, but then from 1940 he was employed inside of Fuhlsbüttel police prison. He then became the deputy to the local Commandant, Johannes Röder, and then in November 1943, Tessmann became the commandant of the prison. Tessmann was now in control of the site, and he was overseeing the brutal prison as the Second World War was coming to an end. Many inmates were sent from the prison to Auschwitz and other concentration camps, and Tessmann was known for being a ruthless overseer. He was involved in torture, and he placed prisoners inside of solitary confinement if they did not give over information to the Gestapo, and some prisoners could not deal with this and took their lives because of their treatment in Tessmann's facility. He brutalised inmates and battered them, and also got involved in executions at the prison. One former guard of the prison, who worked alongside Tessmann, claimed about his work. "During my time on duty, there were about 10 transports to Neuengamme for shootings. Tessmann took part in these shootings. I do not know the nationality of these prisoners who were transported away, except in one case where there were about 20 to 30 Eastern workers. They came from Schirmeyer's station. I remember this case in particular because Tessmann gave me the order to take part in this shooting. I refused and Guard Ruscha got the order, but he also refused." At the end of the Second World War, Tessmann ordered the evacuation of the prison camp, and he ordered a death march of inmates to the Nordmark labour camp. And he told his guards to escort the prisoners, and if they could not make it, or were too weak and were slowing the march down, then they should shoot these victims. Tessmann then went on the run, and he later joined a Wehrmacht battalion that 5 days later disbanded as the Third Reich crumbled. At the end of the war, Tessmann worked on a farm near to Haida, and he claimed he was a former Wehrmacht soldier, and the British occupation authorities left him to it for a while. He reunited with his family, but then on the 29th of July 1945, Tessmann was arrested, and this was based on a neighbour's report. He was then sent to Neuengamme Internment Centre, and he was united with former SS and police colleagues. He was then charged with a number of crimes, including the execution of Soviet forced labourers. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison to begin with, on the 6th of August 1946. However, months later his punishment was then increased for the shooting of 11 Polish prisoners and for ordering a death march, and with this he was sentenced to death. Willi Tessmann was then sent to Hamelin Prison to await his death sentence, and inside of this British-controlled site, the executioner Albert Pierrepoint met with him days before he was due to go through the gallows to calculate the drop required to snap his neck on the execution date. Pierrepoint utilised a simultaneous gallows, and on the 29th of January 1948, Tessmann was summoned from his prison cell, and he was led into the execution chamber. He was also led by Pierrepoint's assistant towards the gallows and was helped up it. Pierrepoint was ready, and a chalk mark had been made for him to stand over the trapdoor. Tessmann then had his arms and legs secured, and Pierrepoint checked that this was the case. Then Tessmann had a white cap thrown over his head. The noose was then placed around his neck and tightened. Pierrepoint made a few final checks and then released the trapdoor, and the brutal commandant of a Gestapo prison was executed. Willi Tessmann was executed as he was seen as a man who had taken part in the executions and killings of prisoners of war, and he was also the commandant of a terrible prison in which terrifying torture was used upon the inmates during the Third Reich. At the end of the war he tried to hide from his crimes, but he was captured and was brought to trial for the horror he had caused. Inside the execution chamber of Hamelin Prison, he went through the gallows on the very same structure that many brutal concentration camp guards, such as Irma Grazer and Josef Kramer, were executed on. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.